the Associate Dean of Mathematics in charge of admissions and outreach at the University of Waterloo. And he will be telling us about transitions and how do you make a transition from high school to university. And this talk is good for any student going to any faculty in any university in Canada. So Dr. D'Alessio has a great deal of experience in admissions, and we look forward to hearing from him. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the University Placement Office, Mr. John in the back, Ms. Annie, the team, Tara, Joyce, for putting together this event. Thank you very much. I'd like to recognize Mrs. Clement Chan, our Executive Director, who's attending today, and of course all the staff who's here. Mrs. Bartlett, our department head, and the teachers who brought their classes down. Thank you very much. And now Dr. D'Alessio.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back here at Columbia International College. I'm originally from Hamilton, so every time I come back to CIC, it's like coming home again. And good to see some familiar faces, and thanks for the invitation and putting this together. So, as was mentioned, my presentation today there's no mathematics in this one, I'm afraid. But there's good information that I want to pass along regarding your next step. And I'd like to think that everybody here is thinking university in the future, as soon as next year possibly. And that's what this talk is going to focus on. Really about the transition from high school to university. Much of the information that I'm going to share with you today is stuff that I learned when I was a director of first-year studies for the Faculty of Mathematics at Waterloo. And as was mentioned, this presentation will be valuable to everybody here, regardless of the program that you're going to in university. Whether it's the sciences, the arts, or engineering, there should be something here for you. And my hope is that you will be able to take something away from this, because some of this is going to come across as common sense. And it is largely common sense. However, when it comes from somebody who has this experience, and sometimes hearing it from a different person, maybe it will settle. My intention here, by the way, is not to frighten you in any way. And I apologize in advance if it comes across that way. Rather, my intention is to inform you of the things you will encounter in your first year of university. And I believe that knowing that in advance can help prepare, at least mentally, of the things that are to come. Also, this presentation, if you think there's valuable information here, you don't have to worry about taking any notes, because this presentation is posted on my webpage. If you look me up, Serge D'Alessio, Google me, you will find my webpage, and under teaching, you will see this presentation posted. I've also left a copy behind on that laptop there, so you guys have a copy for your institute as well. Okay? So this is free, available information for you. Now, here's a brief outline of what I plan to talk about. I'm going to start with a brief introduction. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare high school and university. Following that, I'm going to talk about courses in university. Then I'm going to talk a bit about time management. And then I'm going to talk about the various sources of help that are available at university. Then I'm going to share some essential survival skills. And I'm going to conclude with some personal advice. Okay? So that's the outline of my presentation. Now, many students experience culture shock in their first year of university because of the various changes that they encounter. And these changes will require an adjustment on the part of the student, both academic and personal. The main changes, I think, are four of them. First, there's a change in the academic setting. That is, the learning environment in university is very different from what you're used to in high school. And I will describe how it's different in the slides to come. Next, there's going to be a change in living conditions. For many students, going to university coincides with moving away from home for the very first time. So it's very natural to experience homesickness. In my case, I grew up in Hamilton, as I mentioned earlier. I actually went to McMaster University, the hometown university, so I didn't leave home until I did my PhD and went to work. A lot older than you, some of you here today. And actually, this is where students from Columbia have a distinct advantage over other students, Canadian students, in that you've already left home. You've already dealt with homesickness, or are in the process of dealing with it. And so by the time you go to university, you're going to feel comfortable. Whereas the Canadian high school students going to university, they still have to go through that. So that's a plus for you guys. Then there's a change in expectations. I'm using the word expectations very loosely here. Of course, it's a change in academic expectations, but also perceived expectations. So when students go to university, they go with dreams and goals. The last thing they want to do is disappoint family and friends, or even themselves. And lastly, there's going to be a change in friendships. So for many students, going to university also involves making a new set of friends. And some of those friends will be lifelong ones. In fact, some of you will even meet your lifelong partner in university. This is also where you have an advantage over Canadian students in that you are already coming from different parts of the world, making new friendships. And so next year when you go to university, you might not still have contact with the friends that you meet this year, but you'll make new ones. You've already been through that process. So these are the main changes that I can think of. Next, what I want to do is to compare high school and university. And the items that I want to compare are listed here in this left-hand column. First, we have class time per course. That is the number of hours you spend in class in a given course. That is bum and seat time, we call it. Well, in high school, that is set by the Ministry of Education, and it's about 110 hours. Whereas in university, the number of hours you spend on a given course is significantly less. At Waterloo, for example, it's about 48 hours. Later, I'll explain how I come up with 48 hours. But the main point I want to get across here is that it's less than half the amount of time. So this sums it up quite nicely already. University is about accelerated learning. Imagine learning everything in that grade 12 calculus course or that grade 12 English course in less than half the amount of time. Next, class size. Well, in a high school, typical class sizes can be, I think, maybe 30. 30 is probably a bit on the large side. Whereas in university, it's significantly larger. Now, the size of a class in university will depend on several factors. For example, it will depend on the university that you go to. Like U of T, for example, and if you have a popular elective like first-year psychology, first year could be several hundred. On the other hand, if you go to a smaller university, it could be much smaller, like maybe even less than 100, maybe 50. And actually, in university, some courses that we teach, regardless of the university that you go to, we keep them intentionally small, like language courses. If you want to learn Spanish, for example, we keep the class really small because you have to. It's the only way you can get participation. And that's the only way to teach language. But in general, you should expect a typical class size in university to be about 100. Now, with a class size of 30 and 110 contact hours, now think about it, a class size of 30, it's quite manageable for both the teacher and the students. Teacher can get to know all of you, you get to know each other, perfect. But when you move to a class size of 100, you can't expect the teacher to get to know all of you, the instructor at university. And unless you're a social butterfly, you're not going to get to know everybody in your class. I must say though, you'd be surprised that even with a class size of 100, how some professors make a good concerted effort to get to know their students. Next, the learning environment. I would describe the learning environment in high school as more controlled, whereas in university, it's less structured. Now let me explain what I mean by this. With a class of 30 and 110 contact hours, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for students to ask questions, get your questions answered, get individual help, and possibly time at the end of a class to start your homework. But now, when you move to a university setting with a class of 100 and only 48 hours of contact, you're not always going to get your questions answered. In fact, to be quite honest, there are going to be some days you're going to go to a lecture and not understand anything of what happened that day. You're going to be lost. You're going to take notes, and it's going to mean that you're going to have to go home and fill in those gaps on your own time. So this requires making an effort outside of class and possibly getting extra help from various sources. So I describe that as less structure. The structure that you had in high school is no longer there because of the fact that we have now a larger class and fewer hours of contact. So you have to create that structure on your own outside of class. Course load per term. Now, is this a semester in high school? If it is, I think a typical course load in high school is 4 courses. Whereas in university, a typical course load is 5 courses. So, not only are you going to be learning the amount in less than half the amount of time, the material, but you're also going to be carrying an extra course. So I think you can get the picture that I'm painting here already, that all of this is amounting to an increased workload on the part of the student. Now, at Waterloo and other universities, they also have co-op-like programs. And co-op is actually not an extra course, but probably maybe a third of a course extra, because to participate in a co-op program means that you have to do things during the term. While you're taking the 5 courses, you have to get your resume ready. You have to go to interviews, etc. And so you have to think of that as more than 5 courses if you're participating in a co-op or internship type program. Next we have assessment. So in high school, your grade is based on many activities. It's based on things like projects, homework, essays, tests, and exams. And while this is also true in university, the main difference lies in the weights attached to these activities. In university, your final grade is based largely on how you do on your midterm and final exam. So for example, if you're going into the sciences and engineering, in university it's quite common for your final exam to be worth about 60% of your final grade. And your midterm will be worth probably another 25%. So 85% of your grade is based on how you do on the midterm and final exam. 15% will be devoted to things like assignments and projects. Now in the arts, it won't be as large because there in the arts you'll be handed in essays, and essays can count quite a bit. But my main point here is that tests and exams at university count for a lot more than they did in high school. And that takes getting used to. Next, there's expectations. The only point I'm making here is that the expectations at university are higher than they are in high school for the simple reason that universities are in a position where they can admit the strongest available students. And because of that, you should be able to expect more from them. Now, there is one more thing that I'm going to compare. And does anybody want to guess what that's going to be? What matters most to students? Probably something grades. How do the grades change from high school to university? Well, I think for most university-bound high school students, typical average is around 80%. I know in the Faculty of Mathematics, at Waterloo, we do not admit students with averages less than 80. What do you think a typical average is after first year university? About 70%. It's less. So, and it's true, most students' grades do decline a bit in first year. I'd like to think of that as a consequence of all of this. Students in their first year at university are going through a lot of change. They're trying to adjust as best they can. Something has to give. And for most students, it's their grades. And 10 to 15% is actually quite normal. Next, I want to talk about courses in university. So associated with university courses are the following activities. First, there are lectures and tutorials. So lectures are where the instructor stands at the front of the class and delivers course information, much like what I'm doing here in front of you. And lectures take place in large classrooms. In fact, I mentioned before, a typical class size would be about 100. This could be a typical class size. I'm teaching first year calculus this year, and my class size is about 180. So I'm looking at a sea of faces like I am today. So that's where the instructor delivers course material, and as I mentioned before, the material gets presented at a much faster pace than in high school. And attending lectures in university will require you to develop good listening and note-taking skills. That's important in university. And in fact, it'd be very interesting to compare two students' notes coming out of the first year class. And you look at these two notes and say, wow, did they attend the same class or what? Because they look drastically different, because every student will take down something different from that lecture. Some students take very little notes because they'd rather listen. Other students take everything, even things that the professor doesn't write on the board. Everything they say is just written down. Now, universities at Waterloo in particular, and probably other universities, I know this was also true when I was attending McMaster, is that every course will typically have about 3 hours of lecture per week. Okay? And they could be 3 one-hour lectures, or they could be 2 1.5-hour lectures, or in the case of an evening class, it could be 1 3-hour block. Okay? And then, in addition to that, every course will have tutorials scheduled with it. And so a tutorial, imagine we have this big class. And then what we do is we divide it up into smaller, what we call tutorials. And tutorials, every course will have 3 hours of lecture and 1 hour of tutorial per week. So tutorials are typically where you will get back your graded homework, your graded tests, your graded essays, etc. And because tutorials take place in much smaller classes, they're more conducive to asking questions and getting more individual assistance. So, every week you have 4 hours of contact. 3 hours of lecture, 1 hour of tutorial, 4 hours per week, and at Waterloo, all our semesters are exactly 12 weeks long, giving a total of 48 hours. So that's where that 48 hours came from the previous slide. Also associated with courses at university are assignments, projects, essays, and presentations. So, in the sciences and engineering, you should expect an assignment a week. And when I say an assignment, basically it's homework problems that you have to hand in for grading. And you should expect the homework problems to be much more challenging than what you saw in high school. So advice, do not start the homework the night before, because you'll be shocked. You want to start them as soon as possible. In case you're stuck on a problem, you have lots of time to get extra help. Now, assignments aren't worth much of your final grade. I said earlier that they're worth typically about 15%. In my calculus course that I'm teaching this year, 65% is for the final exam, 25% is for the midterm, and 10% is for the assignments. And the assignments are where you spend all your time. That's where you sweat. That's where you're learning. And the purpose of the assignments is to get you ready for the big ticket items, like the midterm and the final exam. And so by doing the assignments, those are the questions that you should expect similar to be on the midterm and final. So they're getting you ready. Some students think that because they're worth so little, why even do them in the first place? Because that's where you make all your mistakes, and that's where you're doing all the learning. Another reason why assignments don't count for much in universities is because of the fact that we realize that students do get a lot of help in doing assignments. In fact, we encourage it to some extent. We do not encourage copying from one another, but we do encourage students working together in groups to bounce ideas off each other. And so that's why assignments isn't a true measure of what you can do, because we recognize that you probably are getting help to do the assignment. So I'll talk a bit more about making sure that you don't copy from one another, because in our eyes that's cheating. Now other courses like the arts, there you'll be handing in essays, perhaps up to 3 essays a term. And essays will be worth a lot more than a typical assignment. And some courses will also involve projects and presentations, either single presentations or group presentations, or group projects as well. And also associated with university courses are things like labs, practicums, field trips, studio ensembles, and rehearsals. So in the sciences like physics, biology, chemistry, you know you're going to have labs associated with them. And they can even have field trips. And we also, if you're taking a drama course, it could involve a rehearsal. Or if you're in fine arts, a studio. Or if you're in music class, it could be an ensemble. And lastly, of course, there are tests and exams. And as I said earlier, tests and exams are worth a lot more in university than they are in high school. Typically, you should expect 1 midterm in each of your courses that you take. And that duration could be 1 hour up to 2 hours. And that'll typically get announced in the first day of class. And then a final exam. Now, the way final exams usually work is that at the end of term, there's what we call an exam period, where all your exams are typically written. And for example, at Waterloo, the exam period will run from December 5th to December 20th. All your exams will be slotted in that time interval, just over a 2-week period. And it's important that you make sure you do not book any travel for the holidays until the exam schedule is known. Okay? It's essential that you just can't. Going away for travel, visiting family and friends is not an excuse to miss an exam. So you want to make sure the exam schedule is posted before you make any kind of travel, even if it means losing a good seat sale, I'm afraid. Next, what I want to do is talk a bit about time commitment, and that is talk a bit about how much time students spend on a given week on a certain activity. So let's look at a high school student. And bear with me, I hope I got these times reasonably accurate. So, typical high school student probably spends about 25 hours a week attending class. Perhaps 10 hours a week doing homework, it's about 2 hours a night, let's say. And maybe studying 5 hours in a given week, that would be 1 hour a night. And I'm leaving 12 hours for other activities. This could be extracurricular, whether you're involved with sports, clubs at school, things like that, or a part-time job. We're finding a lot of students have part-time jobs these days. And I'm assuming that a typical high school student maybe needs 10 hours of sleep a night. And then if you do the math, you're left with 46 hours left behind for fun stuff. And for a typical high school student, this schedule is quite manageable in that there's plenty of time to do all the important things, like the homework, attending class, and studying, as well as fun things. What do you think this is going to look like for a university student? Well, I propose the following. The number of hours that students spend in class, well, this will depend on the program that students attend. For example, if a student is in an arts program, it'll be about 20 hours of class per week. Whereas those students who want to go into engineering, it's significantly higher. It's probably closer to 30 hours per week. But for a science student, 25 hours a week is about right. Why? Well, because they take 5 courses, and each course involves 4 hours of class a week, so that's 20 hours there. And typical science students also do labs. Maybe 1 to 2 labs a week. So 25 hours a week is actually quite reasonable for a science student. I should mention this as well. The reason science students take significantly less hours a week in class is because, the reason art students have spent less time in class in a given week is because they have to do a lot of reading outside of class. My daughter attended U of T, and she took the arts, and she loves to read. And she told me, wow, I like to read, but the amount of reading I had to do the first year was a lot, even for someone who enjoys it. A lot more reading than, say, an engineering student would have to do. And that's why they have much less class time. The typical rule in university is that for every hour you spend in class, you want to spend at least 1 hour outside of class, doing things like reading over your lecture notes, starting your assignments early, reading the textbook, filling in any gaps, etc. And then perhaps another 10 hours per week studying on average. Of course, during weeks of midterm, you'll be spending a lot more time than that, but maybe on average about 10 a week. And then I'm still leaving 12 hours for other activities. I think it's very important that when you go to university, you keep up with those fun things that you enjoy doing, those extracurriculars, sports. Or we're finding more and more students in university are keeping a part-time job. Maybe they find a bit of satisfaction in doing that, or they just want a bit of extra pocket money. So I keep those 12 hours there, and I'm assuming that a typical university student needs maybe 8 hours of sleep a night. And then again, if you do the math, you're left with 40 hours of fun. Now, when you look at these 2 charts here, you think, well, it appears that it is possible for a high school student to do all the things they did in university. And looking at this, yeah, it does look possible, except there is one catch. In university, it will require developing time management skills to do all those things. And unfortunately, a lot of students haven't acquired those skills yet. They will, but just not in their first year. You also have to remember this, that for a university student, buried in these 40 hours of fun are going to be chores. Chores that a lot of students didn't have to worry about in high school, such as laundry perhaps, grocery shopping, cooking, traveling to visit family and friends on weekends, etc. Now here's where you guys clearly have a distinct advantage over Canadian students in that you're probably doing those things, all those chores already right now, because you've already left home, and you're used to that. And a lot of you, unfortunately, probably can't travel home on weekends because home is too far away. Also, those university students that have aspirations of doing graduate studies, whether it's a professional program like law or medicine or an MBA, or whether it's a graduate program in the sciences or in engineering or mathematics, you need strong grades in order to get into graduate school. It's becoming more and more competitive. And to get those strong grades will mean that you're going to probably want to spend more than this 25 hours a week doing homework, maybe more than 10 hours a week studying. And unfortunately, that can only come from one place. Here, not here. It's essential that you get adequate sleep. Okay? So adequate sleep is essential. I'll talk a bit more about sleep deprivation and its consequences later on. And by the way, the 8 hours a night I said here on average is in addition to whatever time you spend sleeping in class. Sleep is important. Next, I want to talk about easing the transition. Universities are well aware of the fact that students undergo massive amount of change in their first year. And because of this, they put various initiatives in place to help students adjust, to help ease the transition. And here I'm going to list a few of those things. First, I'm going to start with university preparation. And by this, I'm referring to diagnostic tests that are administered early on in the year to assess student skills. And the idea of administering these tests early on is that if we can help detect those students most likely to experience academic hardship, perhaps we can get extra material and resources available to them, and that should help them succeed. So examples include an English language test. Most universities have a form of English language test. At the University of Waterloo, it's a written test. And that's really there to test the students' reading and writing skills. Now, when I was a director of first-year studies for the Faculty of Mathematics, I also put in place a diagnostic math test that we gave on the very first day of class. And that was there just to test the basic high school math skills to make sure that students weren't rusty in those skills. Okay? I even brought a sample of the test that I gave back in first year when I was a director of first-year studies, and perhaps if I see Ms. Marcoux, I can leave it with her if she wants to use that. And again, when I was the director of first-year studies, I set that diagnostic math test for both the Faculty of Math and the Faculty of Engineering. Next, there are workshops that target specific topics such as study skills, exam preparation, time management, etc. And these are usually run out of the Counseling Services Office, and they're run at a minimal cost to the student. Now, the way it works at the University of Waterloo, I just have to get a handout here, is that these courses or workshops that are run are announced at the beginning of the school year, and they have these flyers that are posted all over campus. And this is one that, for example, was posted last year at the University of Waterloo. And these will be spread all over campus in a list of various workshops that are available. And students can sign up as they wish. Okay? And they'll target, as I said, various topics such as these, resume preparation, etc. The next one involves technology. Now, as you probably all know, technology has changed tremendously over the years. And technology, when properly used, can really facilitate learning. There are 3 examples of technology that I'm going to share with you today. The first is one that I'm sure you're already familiar with, and that is course web pages. You should expect every course you take in university to have an accompanying web page for that course. And web pages in university tend to be more dynamic than perhaps what you're used to. For example, it's possible for you on that course webpage to be able to contact every student in the class, for the instructor to email the entire class with important messages. You could even form discussion groups to talk about course material on the webpage. The course webpages are where some professors will actually post their entire lecture notes on the webpage. By the way, I'm not one of those. I don't post my lecture notes. I do something else. I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, some professors will post complete lecture notes on their webpage. That's where you're going to be submitting your essays electronically online. That's where you'll be post solutions and assignment questions, etc. Students can actually go onto the webpage and even look up their grades. And it's set up in such a way that they can only see their grades and nobody else's. This way you can make sure that you can check to make sure the instructor has the right marks recorded for you. And if there are any problems, you can talk to him or her. Students can also write online quizzes through these course web pages and get instant feedback. So at the very least, the course web page acts as a repository for course materials. Another example of technology includes incorporating software into courses. So for example, in the fine arts, it could involve introducing students to Photoshop, a very important software package. Now, when I was the director of first-year studies, I made an effort to introduce students to mathematical software in math courses and also for engineering. So, mathematical software is useful to students in the sciences and engineering. For example, in teaching calculus, I would introduce students to the Maple computer algebra system because that's a powerful software package that can really illustrate the concepts of calculus. Can help visualize these ideas that we're trying to explain with chalk on the board. Graphically illustrate them, visually, etc. And in linear algebra, we introduce students to another important software package known as MATLAB. MATLAB has become an industry standards piece of software. And because Waterloo is a big co-op school, that's important for students to have it because it's an employability skill for them. And the last example of technology involves clickers. Now, clickers might be something that you haven't seen in high school. A clicker is this. It looks like a handheld remote device. And so an instructor that plans to use clickers in class will announce it in the first class, saying that, look, I plan to use clickers, so you have to go buy one. I think they cost typically about $40. And then what you'll do is you'll bring it to lecture. And the professor will set up his lecture in such a way that he'll have a lot of questions that he'll ask the class. Possibly multiple choice type questions. And he'll bring a black box to class with him or her. And so when he asks the questions, is the answer A, B, C, D, or E? You respond by clicking A, B, C, D, or E. And then the black box at the front of the lecture will take that information and display it immediately on the screen. And this is excellent because this will give the instructor immediate feedback as to how well the class is responding to course material. So if the class is not understanding it, then he or she can spend more time on it. On the other hand, if they're getting it, move on. On the part of the student, it also encourages participation. So clickers are gaining momentum. Now, I must confess that I have not used a clicker yet in any of my courses. Some subjects lend themselves easier to the use of clickers than others. And math is one of those subjects where it's harder to use a clicker. But nonetheless, they are used quite a bit in other courses in the arts faculty and even some courses in the sciences. Next, we have academic policy. And by this, I'm referring to rules, regulations, deadlines that students have to abide by. But in particular, I'm talking about rules that are directed to first-year students in particular. Two examples. One of them is a policy that I put in place when I was a director of first-year studies. And that is a calculator policy. In university, I'm well aware of the fact that in high school, students are conditioned to using high-powered calculators. And to me, it made sense that we should have a policy in place on how to deal with this. I had two options. Either not allow calculators at all, or to only allow a certain brand. And I chose to allow only a certain brand of calculator. A basic scientific calculator, non-graphing, non-programmable. And this did two things. First of all, it made sure that all students had equal access to calculators. So you were an advantage over another student because of the calculator you had. everybody more or less had the same type of calculator. And the other is that it lessened the students' dependency on the calculator. The idea here is to really wean students off the calculator, but we don't want to do it abruptly. Students realize towards the end of term, you realize, oh my God, I'm not ready for these exams. Maybe I messed around too much during the term. Or maybe I got sick, I missed a bit of class earlier, and I just can't catch up. We have a provision there to help you. You have to go to the registrar's office to do this before the last day of class. And what we will do is we will give you another chance the following year. But you can only do this once, and it only applies to students in their first year. So there are special rules for students in first year. And lastly, there's the awarding credit for AP and IB courses. We are finding that more and more high schools are offering these programs and courses, and therefore more and more students are coming to university with these programs and courses. So not only do these courses and programs provide excellent university preparation, but they also give students some flexibility. Let me explain. Suppose your school offered AP Calculus, and you took it, and you wrote the AP exam, and got the top grade, which I believe is 5. At the University of Waterloo, we are prepared to give you credit for our first calculus course. I was on the committee that decided whether or not AP Calculus was close enough to our first year calculus course, and after much deliberation, we agreed that, yeah, there's significant overlap with AP Calculus and our first calculus course. And if a student demonstrates that they can get a top grade in AP Calculus, you've convinced us that, yes, you don't have to spend any time taking our first calculus course. We're convinced that you can do it. And so students have a choice. They can either accept the credit for their first calculus course or decline it. So if they accept the credit, this means they're already one course closer to graduation. And they will start taking Calculus 2, the second calculus course in the first term, rather than Calculus 1. On the other hand, if the student chooses to decline the credit, that means they'll forget it happened and take first year calculus, the first course, and this will mean that they'll typically get a very good grade in it, because a lot of the material they've seen before. And also, it will probably lessen their workload because they probably won't have to spend much time on first year calculus. So that's an advantage for the student. So this is the kind of decision that you will have to make. If a university is willing to give you transfer credit, you have a choice there. Do you take it or not? Now, my personal advice on this is the following. If a university is giving you transfer credits, at Waterloo we give as many as 3 transfer credits, my advice would be this. If they're giving you transfer credits for courses that aren't going to be in your area of study, so suppose they're giving you elective courses, so suppose they're giving you a transfer credit for economics, and another transfer credit for French, and then another transfer credit for AP Calculus. I would take a transfer credit for the French and economics, but not take it for the calculus because I want to study I want to do mathematics. And I think it's important that you get a strong foundation in the field that you want to pursue. So I would be inclined to decline the credit for AP Calculus, take it because you get a stronger foundation. Now remember, they're not exact overlap, the 2 courses, AP Calculus and our first calculus. There's a significant overlap, but it's not a complete map over one to the other. That's my personal advice about transfer credits. Next, I want to talk about the various sources of help that first-year students have available to them. And students aren't aware of just how much help we do have available to them. And the important thing is I'm talking about free sources of help. What are they? Well, I'm going to list them. The difference in university, though, is that if you need help, you have to seek help. Help does not go to you, you have to go to help. Okay? So we do have a lot of resources there, but you have to go out of your way to make sure you use them. First of all, if you have any questions with regards to the course you're taking, you're stuck with this material, this concept in your course, the best person to see is your professor or a teaching assistant. I should have mentioned this earlier there, so let me just go back a bit. Remember when I talked earlier about tutorials and lectures? And tutorials are where the big classes are broken up into smaller classes? Well, in university, tutorials are typically run by what we call teaching assistants, not the instructor. And a teaching assistant works closely with the instructor. Okay? So when I say the best person to see for help in the typical course that you're taking, it should either be the professor or teaching assistant assigned to that course. It's part of my job to hold at least 3 office hours per week. Some professors go really out of their way to help students. And so students have to take advantage of those office hours. That's where you get professional help from the professor. Now, universities also have these centers available to them. Like for example, at the University of Waterloo, we have a writing clinic. So if you have any questions with regards to putting an essay together, there's somebody that you can go talk to. And these centers are usually staffed by senior undergraduate students, sometimes professors as well, and teaching assistants. So we also have at the University of Waterloo a math help center. And when I first joined the University of Waterloo, I coordinated the efforts of the Math Help Center at Waterloo. And the way it worked at Waterloo was that we had extra help with students, available to students, basically from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And it was free. And at Waterloo, it was staffed by senior undergraduate students. So it operated on the principle of students helping other students. Sometimes students can connect and explain something to another student faster, or in a way that a professor can take a lot more time doing. At Waterloo, we also have tutors available in the residences in the evenings and weekends, free, for various courses, in the sciences, math, even in the arts. So this amounts to a huge amount of free help that you should take advantage of before spending a lot of money hiring a private tutor. You may not need a private tutor because of all the help that's available. Next, should you have any questions regarding the program that you're in? So for example, you're studying a business program and you have questions about the kinds of careers and jobs that this will lead to. Or perhaps you have problems scheduling classes that you want to take next term. If you have those kinds of questions, then programs will typically have program advisors associated with them. Somebody that you can talk to. All universities also hire professional counselors through counseling services. So if you're dealing with non-academic issues, personal issues, there's something that you can talk to. And you can be guaranteed that whatever you share with them will be treated confidentially. And then each faculty, in fact, even has their in-house counselors at Waterloo. So this way there's easier access to help. So for example, if you're struggling with maybe homesickness, or if you're struggling with a relationship issue, or if you're experiencing a tragedy that just recently happened, there's somebody that you can talk to who cares and knows how to deal with it and help you cope. At the University of Waterloo, probably other universities, there's what we call an office for persons with disabilities. So this office strives to lessen the impact of a given disability. So if you have a diagnosed disability, you would register with that office. You bring medical documentation to that office, and they will do everything they can to help you. For example, sometimes your disability may require that you need extra time to write tests and exams. That office will do that, because what they will do is they will contact instructors, your instructors, and let them know that you'll write exams under their conditions in their office. And they will determine, because they're professionals in this field, they will determine how much extra time you actually need, given your disability. So if you fall into that category, there is help available to you. That office does more than that, though, because suppose you break your arm during the term because of an accident. Well, you can go to that office and they'll help you. Because obviously you will need extra time, and they'll look after you. Also, there are some students who go to university not knowing that they have a learning disability. The environment in high school is such that you can manage. Because of all the extra help that you had, the class time, etc., you were able to manage. But when you go to university, because of the increased workload and higher expectations, these problems can surface. Well, that office will help diagnose it and help the student cope with it. And lastly, there are residence doms. And these are upper year students that live in the residences with you. So if you have any kinds of accommodation issues, there's someone that you can talk to. It may be the noise level on your floor. It may be that with your roommate you're having problems with. There's somebody that you can talk to. And of course, there's always family, friends, and peers available there to help. Next, what I want to talk about are some essential survival skills. And I'd like to think of these as ingredients forming a recipe for success. Now, of course, success in university does require ability. But you know what? You're not going to see ability listed anywhere in my list here, because if you were admitted in the university program, you meet the ability requirement. You wouldn't have been admitted otherwise. But you know what? In reality, often ability or natural or raw talent is usually not enough. You have to mix that talent with other stuff. And what I'm talking about here is that other stuff. So success in university, in my opinion, requires first and foremost attendance. I can't emphasize how important it is to attend classes. Students who choose not to attend class are also choosing to learn the material on their own. And over my years of experience, these are the 3 common excuses that I get for not attending class. Oh, the lecture's at 8:30 in the morning. There's no way I can get up at 8:30. I don't even know what the sunlight looks like at 8:30 in the morning. I'll just get the notes off my friend. Excuse number 2, my prof is excellent. He posts complete lecture notes on the webpage. Why go to class? Excuse number 3, the textbook for the course is great. I can just read the textbook and learn everything. There's no need to go to class. Here are the flaws with those 3 excuses. Number 1, yes, getting notes off getting lecture notes off your friend. Yes. Remember what I said earlier about attending university lectures requires developing good listening and note-taking skills? Somebody else's notes might not mean anything to you. In fact, you may not even be able to read their handwriting. Excuse number 2, professors posting complete lecture notes on their webpage. Yes, some professors do that. I don't. What I tend to do instead is I post summaries of the topics that I covered in each lecture, so that if you missed my class that day, you know exactly what section of the textbook you're responsible for. I even post exercises, so that if you attended class and you could do that exercise, and I give the answer as well, then you understood what happened that day. Now, even if a professor posts lecture notes on the webpage, you know what those lecture notes won't contain? It won't contain the very good questions that fellow students are asking during the class. Remember, you're not only learning from the person standing at the front of the room, you're learning from the students around you as well. And some students will have very good questions. You need to hear the answers to those questions. And I can guarantee you that will not be posted as part of the lecture notes on the webpage. And often I find professors who do post their lecture notes, they're incomplete in the sense that they often say a lot more during the class than they actually post. Excuse number 3, the textbook. As a professor, I search long and hard for the best available textbook for my course. Okay? In fact, the textbook that we're using for first-year calculus is a textbook by Professor James Stewart, who is at McMaster University, just down the street. Unfortunately, I never took a calculus course from him, but I wish I did, because he has a very popular first-year calculus textbook. But anyway, we search for the best available textbook because having a good textbook is an excellent resource. But you know what? When I teach first-year calculus, I do not cover the examples that are in the textbook, because I assume you're reading those. Instead, I cover other examples. So if you're a student in my class that chooses not to attend, you're missing those extra examples, and therefore you're not as prepared as somebody who's reading the textbook and coming to class. So, next on my list would be hard work. If you choose to go to university, you have to expect to work harder than in high school for the simple reason that the workload is greater and the expectations are higher. If it helps, think of it as a job. If after high school you decide to go work for a living, you owe your employer at least 40 hours a week. Well, take those 40 hours and invest it in yourself. Maybe throw another 20 in it, into your career. You have to work hard. These to me are the two most important, but sandwiched in between are others. So for example, you have to be motivated, dedicated, and you have to have discipline. You have to go to university with the desire to learn, because ultimately you're only going to learn as much as you allow yourself to. You know, some professors are going to do a fantastic job in transmitting enthusiasm for their subject, some to the point where it's contagious. But the drive to learn can only come from you. Next, effective time management skills. And I spoke a bit about this earlier. You're going to have to learn how to use your time wisely and efficiently. And in this cartoon, you see that this guy seems to be struggling with that. If you find that you're having to stay up late on a regular basis to meet your assignment deadlines, etc., then something is wrong. Something is clearly wrong, because sleep deprivation has serious consequences and it will catch up to you eventually. Sleep deprivation, first of all, it causes one to be more irritable, and believe it or not, it also affects how much you can retain in your memory. Lack of sleep. And lastly, it will compromise eventually your immune system. So it's essential that you get adequate sleep. So if you find yourself having to stay up late on a regular basis, then you have to re-examine what's going on here. Are you using your time efficiently? For example, your schedule may have a 2-hour break between these two classes. You want to use that break as best you can. Go to the library, do homework, work on an assignment, etc. You can't waste that time. If, on the other hand, you feel that, look, I've done everything possible. I've worked as hard as I can, I'm trying to get sleep, and I'm not even messing or fooling around here, then it's a workload issue. Then you have to talk to an advisor. Are there any options? Can I reduce my workload here, my course load somehow? These are things that you have to determine on your own on a personal basis, early on. Then there's effective study skills. And I could have spent a whole presentation just on this. But in a nutshell, I'm talking about making it a habit to do homework on a regular basis, forming study groups that you can learn from one another. Things like starting your assignments and essays early, not leaving it to the night before. Look, that may work in high school, leaving it to the night before, but I absolutely guarantee you that will not fly in university. You will be surprised and shocked if you try that, okay? Starting your assignments early, filling in any gaps in your lecture notes. Also reading the textbook, reading ahead. And studying for midterms and exams over time, as opposed to studying at the last minute. Research has shown that the key to retaining information is to study over time and not cramming. This curve here is sometimes referred to as the curve of forgetting. What it shows is how a student, suppose attends a class, and by the end of the day, that student has retained as much information as they can. And what this curve attempts to illustrate is how quickly that information will be forgotten if they don't review the material. And what it shows is in a matter of days, you will have forgotten the majority of that information if you don't review it. But by just spending a few minutes a day, literally, going over your lecture notes, you can drastically change the shape of that curve and retain a lot more information. And also a healthy and positive attitude. That is, you want to make sure that you get adequate rest, sleep, you eat well, exercise, etc. I tell math students that they should think of themselves as mathletes in training. So really it's about leading a balanced life, where you want to balance all the hard work associated with university with fun stuff. Now here is where I want to end with some advice, some personal advice. First, study something you enjoy and you are good at. Not only will it greatly increase your chances of success, but it will also make your university experience a much more pleasant one. 2, go to university with an open mind. When you go to university, you're going to be learning some really cool things. In fact, you're going to be exposed to some mind-altering concepts. And I guarantee you, you will all be academically challenged. Now, some of you will go to university knowing exactly what you want to do. You want to become this or that. Some of you are going to university not knowing exactly. You're hoping university will actually open your eyes. And if that's the case, follow your passion once you find it. Very important. On the other hand, there are some students going to university thinking that they want to do this, only to find out that maybe halfway through their studies, they actually end up getting this, subject Y, instead of subject X. If that's the case, again, I suggest follow your passion. I'm an excellent example of that. My first love was physics. And I went through McMaster University taking engineering physics because I thought it was a good blend of the physics that I love and a good profession, engineering. But halfway through my degree, I realized to fully appreciate both engineering and physics, one needed a strong math background. I became more interested in mathematics. I decided, well, should I finish my engineering degree or not? I decided to finish my engineering degree. In fact, I'm a licensed professional engineer. I even have the ring. All Canadian engineers get that ring. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the province of Ontario. But you know what? I haven't worked a day in my life as an engineer. Do I regret ever doing engineering physics? Absolutely not. You know why? Because engineering physics led me to my true passion, which is mathematics. And for that, I will always remain grateful. So when you find your passion, follow it. 3, don't go to university with high school expectations. What matters in university is how you do relative to your class, not relative to the marks that you used to get in high school. So, for example, when you get back your first midterm test or your first essay and you get 75% on it, don't take the attitude, 75%? I used to get 80s and 90s in high school. No, don't take that attitude at all. Wait until the instructor mentions what the class average was. And if the class average turns out to be 70%, you're doing good. You're doing better than the average. What more do you want? That's what matters at university. If, on the other hand, your mark was less than the class average, then that's a warning. I'm flipping here. Try to understand what went wrong there. Was it because on this test, I didn't study this topic as well enough? Or maybe on this essay I misunderstood the question? Try to figure out what it is that could have caused that and improve it for the next time. Remain focused. I tell you, in university, there are a lot of distractions coming your way. A lot. So it's important that you remain focused on the things that matter. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd like to think that your education is one of those things that matters. But for some of you, it may be other things, like student government, get involved with activities. But I like to think education is one of those important things. Don't try to do too many things and then do nothing well. Try to focus on the few important things and do them well, I think. Enjoy the independence and freedoms. I say this with both excitement and caution. Excitement because I know many of you are more than ready and can't wait to be on your own. But as a parent, I also say it with a bit of caution because as young adults, you're now going to have to learn how to balance the temptations of this newfound freedom with a certain level of responsibility. Now, the next two, I'm afraid, are going to be very heavy here. And I need your attention. If you didn't listen to anything, if you've been sleeping up to now, that's fine. But wake up now, because the next two items are very, very important. And I need your attention. Take the time to learn the academic policies and rules. I know CIC has strong and has a lot of discipline instilled in me, but you know what? University rules are very, very different. And at times, university rules can be very unforgiving. So it's very important that you take the time at the beginning of the school year to learn out what the rules are. For example, if you hand an assignment in late, what happens? What's the policy? Well, I can tell you right now, I can save you some time. If you come to the Faculty of Mathematics, the policy is this: 0! You get 0, goose egg, nil, squat, zip. Okay, you do not accept any kind of imperfection. That's unprofessional. You have to learn how to submit assignments on time. In fact, even if it's a few minutes late, it's late. Simple as that. But find out what it is at the university that you go to, and it's a faculty that you attend the program. Also, to remain in the program, they have rules and requirements. You have to maintain certain averages, for example. Find out what that average is. Avoid unexpected surprises at Christmas. Also, be very, very careful about cheating. At the universities, at Waterloo in particular, we have a zero tolerance to any form of cheating. Okay? This is taken very, very seriously at Waterloo, any form of cheating. In fact, we have a zero tolerance to cheating, meaning that if you get caught cheating on any assignment or test, the university-wide policy is that you get 0 on that test or essay that you cheated on, and then you get 5% taken off your final grade. 5%, that's pretty heavy, pretty severe. And I'm sure other universities have similar policies, no nonsense. You know, and I talked earlier about how technology has changed over the years. Well, unfortunately, and I must confess though, you know, when I was going through university, and I'm revealing my age here, we didn't have things like the web. So I just couldn't cut and paste something even if I wanted to. But these days, with the web readily available, I must admit it is very, very easy to do things like this. But technology has advanced to the point where it helps catch cheaters. In fact, some professors will use software to make sure that when you hand in your assignment electronically, they'll put it through a software package, one of them being turned. Way better than copying it, because if you get caught, it's very serious. And it's only worth 1%. Don't focus on that. And actually, cheating isn't black and white. Let me give you an example. Suppose you worked really hard on your assignment. You sweat, blood and tears on this assignment, but you're proud of it, you got it all. And then your friend over there says, oh, can I just borrow your assignment? I just want to see something because I was stuck on this, you know. And I promise I'll hand your assignment in and my assignment in together. And you trust your friend. You give it to your friend. But then your friend ends up copying an entire question, verbatim, word for word. And suppose a marker sees that, hey, these two questions, these solutions look awfully identical. They even made the same column mistakes. And then what's going to happen is that marker is going to bring it to my attention, the instructor. And I'm going to look at this. And we have a term in university for that. We call it excessive collaboration. That's a polite thing for cheating. And then I have to make the difficult call. Is this cheating? Or do I give you a very firm warning? I don't like to be in that position, but sometimes I have to make that call, depending on how similar those assignments were. So be very careful. You're both cheating, by the way, even though you've done nothing wrong except lend your assignment to the wrong person. So be very careful. It's not black and white. The last thing I want to talk about regards illness. If you get sick, assess your illness very, very carefully. Look, if you get sick, the most important thing is your health. Seek medical attention, but get medical documentation and get it to the hands of your instructor as soon as possible. So getting sick is not the problem. It's when your illness causes you to miss a lot of class. That becomes a problem. For example, if you miss even just a week of school in university, think about what you've missed. In each course, you missed the equivalent of 2 weeks of high school. And then multiply that by 5. That's a lot. You've missed over a week. That's a lot. It may not be possible for you to catch up. You may want to see an academic advisor and talk about what your options are. Maybe it makes more sense for you to drop a course or two so that you can catch up with the others. Here's a real story. My daughter, in her first year at U of T, she contracted H1N1, if you recall swine flu. There were 4 of them in their residence that contracted this. And they were forced to stay in their room for several weeks. I think it was 2 to 3 weeks. In fact, they even gave them their own bathroom. You guys just use that one. They were trying to control the spread of this. Of course, as parents, we were really concerned. But she decided that she wanted to stay there. She did not want to come home. And we respected her decision. But at the end of the day, she did the smart thing. She ended up dropping 2 of her 5 courses. And actually did okay in the remaining 3. But if she tried to stick in all those 5 courses after missing all that material, I do not think it would have worked out as well. Now, what happens if you miss a midterm in university? Well, again, you have to get medical documentation. But you know what will happen in the math faculty, in the course that I'm teaching, the first year calculus course? So, if you miss my midterm, in fact, we even have this on the course outline, there are no makeups tests in the Faculty of Math. So if you miss my midterm, and you give me medical documentation that I think is valid, then this is what will happen. In your case, normally your exam would be worth 65%, but you missed the midterm, and the midterm was worth 25%. So now for you, your midterm is going to be worth 65 plus 25, or 90% of your final grade. The weight of the midterm just gets transferred over to the final exam. Think of the implications. Now, when you get sick, you have to assess how sick are you. Is it just a mild stomachache or headache? But other than that, I know my stuff and I can concentrate, then you know what? You're better off going in there and writing the test. On the other hand, if you're sick to the point where I can't even focus or concentrate, do not go in there and write the test. Because if you go in there, that mark stands. You can't use it as an excuse otherwise. And missing exams get a bit more complicated, but I'm not going to go into that because that depends drastically from one faculty to the other, even at the University of Waterloo, and it will change at different universities. So that's your homework to find out what happens. I think I will stop there. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I want to end by saying this. In my case, my years in university turned out to be the best years of my life, and I hope that's also true for you. Thank you very much.